Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Games We Play podcast. I'm your host, Brian Brindley, where each and every week we go through some of the biggest sports news and topics for the week. On today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about UFC 242, and we're going to talk about the first week of the NFL a little bit. I'm going to make some predictions. Should be a pretty fun episode. I'm pretty excited for it, so let's get rolling. Enough of the semantics. So, biggest news of the week, obviously, in the NFL is probably Ezekiel Elliott. He accepted an extension with the Cowboys, 6 years, $90 million, I believe. Let me double check on that really quick. But before we go forward, I think that the Cowboys made the right move in signing Ezekiel Elliott. Extending him, obviously. But because I think he's such a great running back, I think that he does so much for the team, not only running the football, but he's a great pass catcher out of the backfield, and he can actually block a little bit, which I think he doesn't get enough credit for. So he's actually a pretty decent blocker. So $90 million, $50 million guaranteed. So there's a lot of Cowboy blogs that are interesting. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's a pretty good contract, I think. I think it's a lot of money. A lot of people have a lot of issues with paying Zeke that much money, and I might as well because he's a running back. He's not a quarterback, not a linebacker. Running backs tend to have a lot less longevity in the NFL, so we might see a little bit of deterioration and not as much return on investment toward the end of that contract. But for what I'm thinking is probably what Jerry Jones is thinking is the Super Bowl run is the next 2 years, basically. You got to extend Dak. You've extended a bunch of your core, especially the younger guys, which I think is a smart move for longevity, but especially for keeping their head in it, because I think that giving the players the money and the freedom that they want is going to make your team happier, and I think that this move for Zeke especially gets him secure, and it gets him locked in for the season, so he doesn't have to worry about preserving his body so that he can be an attractive commodity to another team. Now he knows I'm locked in here, so I need to try my best. I need to do my best, especially because he's kind of, it's playing on the audience and fan expectation too. Cowboys fans love Ezekiel Elliott, but I think if he would have held out, they would have soured on him, and I think that even some have already soured on him for sitting out or for holding out 2 years early, for holding out a year early, so 2 years in advance instead of the normal route, which is you hold out a year before your contract ends. So now he's got something to prove to the fans. He's got the money. He has the years guaranteed. So I think this is a fantastic move by the Cowboys. I think they're going to have to extend Dak Prescott. I'm not as in love with Dak Prescott as a lot of other people are. I think he's a good team, game manager quarterback. And I know that term is used a lot in a negative sense, but I actually think that that's one of his best attributes is that he doesn't really feel the pressure. At least it doesn't translate to looking like he feels the pressure. He's not a fantastic thrower of the football. He's a good playmaker. He knows when to run, when to throw the ball for the most part. And a lot will call him Dink and Dunk Dak because that's just the, that's just like the kind of thing that you go with when you want to discredit the guy because he can't throw the long ball like a Patrick Mahomes or an Aaron Rodgers can. But, checkdowns are okay. Like a lot of people don't realize that Tom Brady is actually another quarterback who throws checkdowns a lot, and he's pretty much the consensus greatest quarterback that's ever played the game. So, not saying that they're on the same level, but I'm saying that that's an attribute that's similar between the two of them. But anyway, so I think the Cowboys' Super Bowl window is the next 2 years because you're going to start to get into real serious cap trouble after that. You're going to have to start letting key pieces go that don't necessarily sell tickets but are really important for you to succeed as a football team. So I think it's the next 2 years, and especially looking at this year, I think they can make a legit run this year. We'll see. I want to see a little bit how the NFC shapes out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But I think that this is actually probably their best opportunity, because I don't think next year they'll have as good of an opportunity because we'll see how everything shakes out. You're probably going to lose pieces even next season because you extended Zeke this year. We'll see how that all shakes out, though. I'm very excited to see what the Cowboys do this year. I'm not a Cowboy hater, for those of you that don't know. Most people either love or hate the Dallas Cowboys. I'm very neutral on them. I'm more interested in them than anything because they're just such a presence in the media and in this country. Like, they garner so much attention and so much criticism because they're just this massive franchise that has this massive profile and they're infamous. So I'm really, really excited to see how that's going to shake out this year. I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you think their record's going to be? How far do you think they're going to go in the Are they going to make the playoffs? Go ahead and let me know. And do you like this Zeke signing? Do you think they signed him for too much? Did you disagree with him holding out a little bit early? How do you think this is going to play into Dak Prescott's contract? The thing that's going to be interesting, too, going forward with Dak Prescott's contract is Jared Goff's extension that he just signed, which was massive. And I think that Dak is going to look at that, and Dak's agent is going to be like, now, nothing against Jared Goff, like made it to a Super Bowl, obviously, but Dak has been more consistently successful as a quarterback than Jared Goff has, and he's gotten all this money, and he doesn't have the offensive weapons that a Jared Goff has. He hasn't had the receiving core until he had Amari Cooper. He didn't really have much of anything. He had Dez in a diva year, and he had, I guess it would be Cole Beasley before Amari Cooper, which is like, wow, that's turning heads. But we'll see how that all shakes out. Let me know what you guys think. But we're going to move on. Topic number 2, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Dustin Poirier, UFC 242. I'm super excited for this card, mostly just for the main event, to tell you the truth. Obviously, I'm a UFC fan, so I love watching the pay-per-views when I can, but especially Khabib's return to the octagon. This is so exciting. His last time in the octagon was when he beat Conor McGregor, and then obviously everybody knows about the entire kerfuffle that happened afterwards. This is his comeback. He's facing off against Dustin Poirier, who's a great fighter. He's got a really good story, too. He's a really good Cinderella story. So let's just kind of look at them a little bit. So Khabib is 11-0 in the UFC, and Dustin Poirier is 25-5. So Poirier has significantly more experience in the octagon in the UFC setting than Khabib Nurmagomedov does. Dustin Poirier is on a three-fight win streak. His last win was against Max Holloway, and keep in mind that was a lot more recent than Khabib's last time in the octagon because Khabib had to serve a suspension because of the extracurriculars that occurred after the win over Conor Gomedov. So where this fight kind of breaks down to me is actually it's similar to McGregor, except I think Poirier is a better grappler than McGregor is. And also, I think that Poirier has a little bit more of an advantage in the sense that Khabib hated Conor McGregor. Like, he hated Conor McGregor. So he kind of had that extra tenacity and extra just anger and just frustration that he just went at him immediately. And there was clearly bad blood there, clear by the fact that after the fight, all hell broke loose inside and outside of the octagon. And I think with Poirier, Khabib is going to be back to a more reserved, a more disciplined sort of fighter. Not that he wasn't against McGregor, but he was definitely a lot riskier and a lot more aggressive than he has been in his past fights. But Poirier is a good striker. I believe he has 15 wins by knockout. Let me go ahead and look that up really quick. So Poirier, I think, is a good striker. But again, Conor McGregor is a good striker, and we saw how that went. Khabib proved himself as a striker because I remember going into that fight, there was the question of, okay, if the fight starts on your feet, you don't start on the ground. Khabib is a world-class wrestler, one of the best that the game's ever seen, and it's 13 wins by knockout for Dustin Poirier, by the way, not 15. That's my apology. 6 wins by submission, though, which is, so he can grapple. He's not as good of a grappler as he is a striker, but anyway, back to my original point. I remember going into the McGregor fight, it was like, well, the fight starts on their feet. They're going to be striking off the bat. That's where McGregor's advantage is. You start off striking. Even if you get kind of tired at the end of the round and he gets you on the ground, as long as you survive, you get back up to your feet and you're back in the striking game. But Khabib kind of went after Conor and actually did a really good job of striking with Conor and not letting himself, get suckered into those counter strikes that Conor is so infamous for. Dustin Poirier is, I think, not as good of a striker as Conor McGregor is at Conor McGregor's best, but I think he's a better he's a better ground guy, so I think he can at least kind of tussle a little bit better with Khabib on the ground. Khabib's obviously a world-class wrestler, and I think that he's miles ahead of both of them, but the gap between Conor and Poirier is at least somewhat significant in my opinion. So we'll see how this all shakes out. I'm really excited. I think that Khabib is the favorite, and he should be the favorite, I think. But I think there's a question of ring rust. Is there going to be some struggles for Khabib getting back in the octagon after not being in the octagon for so long? It's been a year, I believe, if not more, since he's fought in the UFC because of that Conor McGregor suspension, and there was all sorts of who's he going to fight next and kind of taking his time and picking his opponent, which he has the right to do. So if I had to pick the fight, I would pick Khabib because I'm a big Khabib fan. I think that he is one of the best fighters on this planet, unquestionably. I think that he will be... I have questions about ring rust, but in my opinion, I don't think that he'll have them. He'll have it. I think it'll be more of an aggressive thing, like I'm finally back. It's time to prove that it's time to prove once again that this is my sport. I'm the best wrestler in the world. I'm the best fighter in the world. I'm going to prove it. I think that he's going to win pretty handily. I'd say it will probably go into the third or the fourth round if I had to say so, because I think he's going to try to feel him out a little bit. Khabib's not going to be super duper aggressive, but he's going to try to kind of feel it out and then probably, work his magic and just wear you down. That's what Khabib does. He just wears you down. Then you're on the ground and you're like, man, I'm out of energy. I'm tired. He's been grappling with me for minutes on end. What am I supposed to do? And then that's when he just gets you. Just chokes you out, and then you got to tap, and then it's all over. Khabib will walk out the winner that night. That's my opinion, at least. That's my prediction. And speaking of predictions, let's get into our last topic of the day, and that's Week 1 of the NFL, which starts tonight. I'm recording this on Thursday morning. It should publish by Thursday evening, but just to let you know, it is 9:51 a.m. on Thursday. So in case I publish this and it goes up later in the Thursday night game, and somebody's like, maybe you saw the Packers beat the Bears or the Bears beat the Packers, and you just threw that up and you just want to make yourself look right. No. First off, don't really care that much. I think the last video got 15 views, and most of those are probably bots, if I'm being honest. So I'm not proving this to anybody, but I mean, if you really want to think that, I guess go ahead. I mean, I'm recording on my phone, so I can't show you that it's 9:51 on a Thursday, but I guess you could just believe me. That'd be cool. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Week 1 NFL schedule, and I'm going to take you through every game and give you a little bit of a breakdown on what I think is going to happen, my thoughts on, maybe a couple of thoughts on that team if I haven't addressed them on the podcast yet. We'll see how this goes. I haven't really planned out this segment. I just have the title on here on the show queue, and we're just going to kind of wing it from there. We'll see how this goes. So, obviously tonight, the Green Bay Packers play the Chicago Bears. It is the NFL's 100th season this season. Excuse me. And you got to start off with the oldest rivalry in the NFL, right? Green Bay Packers, Chicago Bears. Now, I'm picking the Bears in this game, and I'll tell you why. First reason is Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack is an incredible player. He's an incredible just force to be reckoned with on the defense for the Bears. The Bears defense is great. And then Mitchell Trubisky, obviously, I have questions about him. I think he's I think yesterday in a group message with my fantasy football, opponents, I said that he is he's just like the most average quarterback that I've seen for the most part. I haven't seen anything particularly special about the guy, but I haven't seen anything particularly bad about the guy. And that defense is so good that I think it can carry them. Aaron Rodgers obviously is one of the best quarterbacks to ever touch football. He's a great player, and the Packers as a whole got significantly better this offseason, I believe. You got first-year head coach Matt LaFleur, and he's an offensive-minded guy coming from Tennessee. I believe he's part of the McVay kind of regime that was in L.A., and then he set sail off to Tennessee to be an offensive coordinator, and now he's the head coach for the Green Bay Packers. So I think that's going to help Rodgers eventually throughout the year because he's an offensive-minded coach. He's a newer guy. He's got new ideas. I think that'll be challenging for Rodgers. I think that they'll butt heads like most people have, suggested, but I think that that'll end up being pretty good for Aaron Rodgers. I think it'll get him to, kind of try new things and develop a little more as a quarterback because, for Mike McCarthy, even though I think he deserves more credit than he got, especially once he was in his, latter stages at Green Bay. I think people gave him a lot more grief than he deserved because I think he's actually a really good coach. I think he just was incompatible with Rodgers, and I think Rodgers outgrew him in a sense. I think that the other thing, too, is that McCarthy wasn't really challenging Rodgers. It's been pretty well documented that McCarthy was like, word is gospel, my word is gospel, and, not really trying to work with Rodgers or challenge him in a way, just kind of like do it or don't, and that didn't work with a guy like Rodgers who plays with a chip on his shoulder, who plays like, hey, I'm the best guy in the room, and all that kind of stuff. So I think the Bears are going to win because, A, Khalil Mack, B, I think Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers are going to have to adjust to each other a little bit, and this is the first real game situation that they're in. It's a division game, so anything can happen. And I also think, finally, it's in Chicago. I think that the Bears underwent kind of a renaissance last year. Obviously, we all know how their season ended in a pretty tragic fashion, but I think that there is kind of a resurgence, and I think that home field advantage will be significant. I think that the Bears will be ready to go. I think they're ready to prove something after the way their season ended last year. I think that being in your home crowd helps a young quarterback like Mitchell Trubisky be a little more comfortable in a game situation. The Bears' defense will be amped up by exactly how loud the crowd's going to be when they're on defense. So I would pick the Bears tonight. That's the only Thursday night game. Then we get into the Sunday. The Sunday just slew. So Rams play the Panthers. My opinion, I think the Panthers are going to win this game, assuming that Cam Newton is healthy and assuming that he plays at the level that he can play at. Panthers are at home. I think the Rams are going to be I think the Rams are going to falter a little bit as a team this year, I should say. I think that they still have a great roster. I think they're still going to be a playoff team. But I do have some questions about them shaking off, that sophomore slump. It's a thing. I've seen it before, especially at the beginning of the season. It can be, a little difficult to readjust. And now everyone's gunning for you. Everyone's coming at your head because you represented the NFC in the Super Bowl last year. So everybody is gunning at you. That is every team that plays against you. It's their basically Super Bowl or championship game for the most part for that season. So I think the Panthers will win week 1. I think the Rams will address their mistakes, and they'll be great for the next few weeks, maybe faltering again, probably week 10, week 12. But I think that they'll lose their season opener, and the media will go into, are the Rams finished? Was extending Goff for so much money a bad idea? But I think the Rams will be fine. I just think this first game that they'll drop because the Panthers are at home. Cam Newton, I think, is on the warpath and has something to prove this season. And yeah, that's how I'm feeling. And Christian McCaffrey is really underrated as a running back. My boy Tyler knows about that. But yeah, let's continue. Eagles at Redskins at the Eagles. Eagles take that pretty handily. I don't see any reason why they shouldn't take that. I don't think I have to delve into that. Bills playing the Jets on the road, and I think the Jets win this game as well. Le'Veon Bell added to that roster. Sam Darnold in his second year. You got a new coach, Adam Gase, out of Miami, coming to the New York Jets, an offensive-minded guy. And, I think Robbie Anderson's actually a really underrated receiver, by the way. Helped me a lot in fantasy last year. Okay, Atlanta Falcons at the Minnesota Vikings. So the Vikings are an interesting team. In a lot of the preseason predictions that I've seen, it seems like nobody's got really a consensus on where the Vikings are going to be at this season. And Falcons are kind of a similar way, but they're both kind of in a similar kind of limbo spot. They've made postseason runs in the last 5 years. They have, had a little bit of they've had like tastes of success, but not consistent success. I apologize for my dogs barking in the background. But so in this game, I'm not exactly quite sure who to pick. I think I'm actually going to pick the Falcons because I think that they're going to be out to prove something because the NFC South, you got the Panthers, you got the Saints, you got the Falcons. You got to come out early. You got to come out strong. You have much more of an incentive, I think, than the NFC North, where I think that, yes, there's good teams. There's the Packers and the Bears there. But I think that the competition is much more cutthroat in the NFC South this year. And I think that it's going to really be like, hey, you really got to win this division if you want to get in the playoffs, because the NFC is really good at top 2 teams in divisions. Like in the West, you've got Rams up top, and then there's, squabble between whether it's the Seahawks and the 49ers at that second spot. In the North, you got Packers, Bears, and Vikings. You got good trios of teams at the top of each division, so wild card spots are going to be really tough to come by. So these teams are really going to have to come out strong. So both teams are going to really, really come out strong. I'm going to pick the Falcons just because I believe in their quarterback more. Matt Ryan over Case Keenum. Not Case Keenum. Kirk Cousins. And yeah, that's just kind of how I'm feeling on that game. Ravens at the Dolphins. Ravens take that handily. Dolphins, I think, are going to be the worst team in the NFL this season, so I don't think I have to explain myself. Earl Thomas playing for the Ravens now. That's of note. Lamar Jackson in his first full season as the starting quarterback of the Baltimore Ravens. We'll see how he does. There's a lot of talk about what kind of offense that they're going to run and how they're going to utilize him. I'm very curious about that game. I'll probably watch that game because I think it's more intriguing than a lot of people are giving it credit for. And we got Chiefs at the Jaguars. I think the Chiefs take that game handily. You have Patrick Mahomes, the reigning NFL MVP. You got a receiving core that's just absolutely stacked. And then you add Shady McCoy in your backfield. The Chiefs are going to take that game pretty handily despite being on the road. Titans at the Browns. Interesting game. I think that the Browns are going to come out swinging. I think they're going to come out strong. They're at home. They have obviously the roster additions that they made this offseason. The key one being Odell Beckham Jr. That receiving core is ridiculous. You got Odell Beckham. You got Jarvis Landry. You got David Njoku. And your backfield's solid as well. You have Baker Mayfield as your quarterback. And your defense actually has some pretty good pieces too. Obviously, Myles Garrett being the key piece there. I think that the Browns handily defeat the Titans at home. Colts at the Chargers. So, interesting game. Colts obviously coming hot off the heels of the announcement of their quarterback, Andrew Luck, retiring. And the Chargers always seem to be a team that is just right on the cusp of making that Super Bowl run, but they just never do it. I think that the Chargers win this game because they're at home, and even though, the LA Chargers, not exactly great home field advantage from how it seems ever since leaving San Diego. There's been kind of like a small revolt, it seems like, within the fan base, and I don't know if it's that much of a home field advantage. Playing against the Colts, it's probably more significant, and because you had that playoff run last year, you probably are going to have a little bit more support, but we'll see how that... Excuse me, that's gross, I apologize. We'll see how that shakes out. I think the Chargers win pretty handily. I like Jacoby Brissett as their quarterback, and them extending him makes me think that he's doing a lot better within the offense than even we might expect. So we'll see, and I think the Colts have a really good roster. I still think that the Colts will win the AFC South, but I think in this game the Chargers just take it because they're at home, and I think the Chargers are just the better squad overall. So moving on from there, we have the Bengals at the Seattle Seahawks. I think the Seahawks win this game pretty handily. Their home field advantage is well documented. I think they have a better roster than the Bengals. I think the Bengals are kind of undergoing a little bit of a transformation right now, trying to figure out what they're trying to be. And yeah, we'll see how that all goes. Obviously, you're dealing with new coaching as well. So I think that the Seahawks, obviously with that giant trade acquiring Jadeveon Clowney, Pete Carroll has another just stud defender on his roster, and we all know how he is coaching up a defense. So I think that the Seahawks win this game pretty handily at home. 49ers at the Buccaneers. I think that the 49ers take this. I have questions about Jimmy Garoppolo, especially with how much money that he's been given versus how much he has even stepped foot on a football field, not in street clothes. But I think that the 49ers have a better team than the Buccaneers do. I think the Bucs are a lot better than people are giving them credit for. I'm not a big Jameis Winston fan, but I think that Bruce Arians is the coach that can help develop him as a quarterback. I think that he will get better this year, and I think that the Buccaneers will find success despite being in a loaded division this year. But for this first game, I'm going to take the 49ers on the road. New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys are going to win this game. Better roster. Giants are in a rebuilding phase. When Eli Manning is your quarterback, I'm sorry, I'm not going to pick you most of the time. I think it's going to be closer than a lot of people think, simply because, especially in division games, it's kind of a wild card. You never really know what's going to happen. So Saquon's probably going to have a monster game because he's really like the only impressive offensive skill player that's on the Giants roster. But Cowboys will take the game. All right, we're reaching towards the end here. So Detroit Lions at the Arizona Cardinals. Interesting game. So it's obviously Kyler Murray's debut, and we'll see how that shakes out for him. We'll finally get to see Cliff Kingsbury's air raid offense, or a version of it that's coming to the NFL. There's been a lot of talk about what that's going to look like, how that's going to affect Kyler Murray. I'm not exactly sure what I'm even expecting. I'm expecting a fun and interesting game for sure. I'm definitely going to watch that one. But we'll see how it all shakes out. If I had to pick a winner in this one, I would have to say it's going to be the Detroit Lions, simply for the fact, I'm going to adjust my chair a little bit, simply because I think that the Cardinals are going to have to undergo a few growing pains, especially in the beginning of this season. I think that they're going to get better towards the end of the season, but it's going to be a rough beginning. That offensive line is god-awful. It's terrible. I do like some of the roster additions that they've made. I think that, well, I'm not the biggest fan of Michael Crabtree. I think that adding a significant receiver is going to do nothing but help your young quarterback. I think that adding Cassius Marsh actually as a kind of probably a defensive role player, I'd say, is going to be good because he has played for the Seahawks and he has played for the 49ers, and he knows those teams pretty well, obviously, so he can be significant help against those squads. And, I just think that despite making those additions that I like, I just think that the Lions are a little bit ahead. Matt Stafford is obviously, in my opinion, he's a really underrated quarterback. Hasn't had a lot of success, but the early parts of his career were mired by poor management and whatnot. But excuse me. So yeah, I'm gonna take the Lions on the road in that game. Steelers at the Patriots. So Sunday Night Football, Steelers at Patriots. Obviously, you start off on Thursday night with the Packers and the Bears, and now you're going with the Steelers and Patriots on Sunday Night Football. I'm picking the Patriots at home. I think that the Steelers are not going to be as bad as people expect. I expect them to pick up either the wild card or the division in the AFC North. AFC North. Oh yeah, that's right. Wow, weird brain fart. Brown fart. Anyway, so Steelers at the Patriots. I'm picking the Patriots just because coming hot off the heels of a Super Bowl. Kind of disappointed that N'Keal Harry is going to be injured for this game. I would have loved to see how he fits in with their offense. But Steelers are undergoing a little bit of change. They lost Le'Veon Bell, who they didn't have during the season last year, but now that he's gone for real. James Conner, I think, is a great running back. Not Le'Veon Bell level, but he's a good replacement. And then receiving-wise, you still got Juju Smith-Schuster, but you lose Antonio Brown, who, in my opinion, as I've said in a past episode of the podcast, is probably the best receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. And obviously he's causing more headaches for the Oakland Raiders, like I said he would, and like everybody else said he would, but that's another topic for another episode. But Steelers are going to have to make a few adjustments. Ben Roethlisberger is going to have to make a few adjustments to having less high-caliber veterans on his roster. And I think that the Patriots will take advantage of that, and they will win at home on Sunday Night Football. Now, moving into Monday, we have two games on Monday night. First one is the Houston Texans playing against the New Orleans Saints, and I think the Saints take this game handily. The Saints read to me as a team that is really, really gunning for what they think they've deserved the last two seasons. 2 seasons ago, they suffered at the hands of Minnesota in the playoffs and the Minnesota Miracle, and then obviously there was the controversial call at the end of last season's playoff game against the Los Angeles Rams, and I think the Saints are probably going to just be sick of it and be like, well, let's just roll over people. If we just keep getting in these close situations and losing, let's just roll over people and let's start that tempo now. The Texans obviously made a bunch of deals this past week. They dealt away Jadeveon Clowney, which a lot of people were like, "What?" But then they added, Laramie Tunsil, and they added a few more offensive pieces. So the Texans are, I think, in better shape than they were a week ago. But I still think that Drew Brees and the Saints are just the better roster. than the Houston Texans. And again, these week 1 picks are super hard to make because you have no idea what they're going to look like this season, what their attitude's going to be like, what their play style, play tempo is going to be like, especially for teams with newer coaches, which a lot of these teams have. But I think I'm going to take the Saints at home in that game. And then the Denver Broncos at the Oakland Raiders. I'm going to go ahead and take the Broncos in this game. I'm not really confident in either team, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure what they're bringing to the table, but I do know that the Raiders have a lot to prove, but I just don't know how they're going to mix, and I think they're going to need a little bit of time to adjust to having Antonio Brown on a new roster and adjusting to, new guys, adjusting to John Gruden's coaching style. So I'm going to pick the Broncos in that game. All right, so those are my picks for week 1 of the NFL season this year. And that is going to do it for this episode of the Games We Play podcast. I have been your host, Brian Brindley. Let me know if you like this episode. Comment down below what you thought about my thoughts, the episode, any suggestions you have for future topics for the show. I will see you guys next week. Thank you again so much for tuning in. If you like this, share it with your friends. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. And football is back, baby. So... also, let me know what you think about that UFC pay-per-views coming up this weekend. You think Khabib's going to win? You think Poirier's going to win? Let's see. I'm excited. It's a fun weekend of sports up ahead, but I got to go do some homework so that I can be prepared to watch those sports when they come on this weekend. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have yourselves a great day. Take care.